Bernard's Big Leap, Chapter 1. Nope, no way. I'm not falling for this. This can't be real, Bernard said under his breath, with disbelief at what he was reading on his computer screen. He had seen a lot of ridiculous basketball products online, but this sounded too good to be true. The shoes of his dreams, literally. All he'd ever wanted to do was dunk at Elmdale Park to impress his friends and silence his haters. Actually, just one relentless hater, D.K. Hawkins, the oldest guy at the park who claimed to have played at a D1 college despite having no evidence to back up his boasts. He always wore a reversible practice jersey to the park like it was a trophy. Some people say it was all a lie, but DK didn't care. He was the loudest guy on the court and no one dared challenge him. But we'll get back to him later. Right now, Bernard's doubts about the sneaker claims were being silenced by a loud voice of optimism, hoping, urging him to continue reading. Hyperhops utilize a cutting-edge microjet propulsion system that harnesses energy from compact power cells that generate bursts of high-pressure air, allowing for rapid ascents. In other words, Hyperhops were basketball sneakers that would have you jumping out of the gym. The exact science behind them was a mystery, shrouded in secrecy, just like the many other strange products on sketchytech.com, an underground website Bernard visited often, hoping to find something to give his game an edge, just like the high-tech training basketball, the G5000, G5 for short, which had turned out to be more real than he'd ever imagined. When powered on, G5 never stopped talking. When not training with Bernard, he sometimes talked basketball all night and forgot to sleep. Bernard had already put G5 in sleep mode for the evening, hoping for some peace while he shopped, undistracted by G5's strong opinions. Plus, G5 might be angry that Hyperhops could instantly do what he couldn't, help Bernard achieve the one thing his game lacked, hops. Was it an unfair advantage? Maybe. But he was sick of being the only one of his friends who couldn't dunk. Eric, Maurice, Julius, and Alex, each of them could slam dunk with ease. Bernard's father, Walter, poked his head in Bernard's bedroom door, catching him watching the loud and flashy explainer video for the sneakers. "What is that?" he frowned, eyeing the screen. "Oh no, not this website again." He shook his head with disapproval. "This website is the best kept secret on the internet, Dad." "It's gimmicky junk, Bernard," Walter argued. "Look, the tagline says it all. Tech so good it shouldn't exist. Besides that, you just got $100 shoes." "But these are better," Bernard replied, suddenly confident in the shoes' claims. "Better? If by better you mean unpredictable, then yeah. Remember that high-tech toaster you bought your mom and me last Christmas? That clever thing started a fire in the kitchen on its first go and thought it could extinguish the fire with its auto buttering feature. They need to change their tagline to tech so good it might just kill you. We're still finding congealed butter slick spots in the kitchen. I nearly broke my neck getting a glass of water the other night. But Dad, and now you want to bring a pair of rocket shoes into my house? No, sir." "But what about G5? I bought him on the same website, and he's amazing. You even said so yourself." Bernard countered with a good point that Walter couldn't deny. "Okay, if he's so amazing, wake him up and let's see what he thinks of these hippity hypes." Bernard shook his head, grabbed a little silver remote control, and pressed the power button. He grinned nervously as he heard the familiar whir of G5 powering on, hoping but unsure if he would back him up. I was just having the weirdest dream," G5 groaned, voice still groggy. Bernard paused, puzzled. "What was the dream about?" "I wasn't a basketball anymore. I was a giant donut. And I was falling from outer space down to Earth. I was about to land in a giant bucket of hot coffee, and then I woke up." Nice, G5, Bernard giggled, rolling his eyes. Weirdo! What do you think that means? G5 asked, still pondering and staring into space. No clue, Walter said with an eye roll, annoyed. G5, we woke you up from your Dunkin' Donuts nightmare to settle something. Dunkin' Donuts! Of course, that's it! Bernard, you're like Joseph from the Bible. G5, tell my dad these hyper-hop shoes are worth it. Bernard interrupted, eager to prove his point. Hyper-hops are the real deal. Developed by my creator at Fukuzawa Sports Equipment Institute. Designed for maximum vertical liftoff on the court. Bernard, you won't just be jumping, you'll be defying gravity, G5 concluded, oblivious that Walter was glaring at the screen. See, Dad? Even G5 says they're perfect. Bernard's excitement spiked. I don't know. You sure you want to spend all your allowance and lawnmowing money on... Yes! I'll make it all back fast, Bernard assured him. I just secured 4 new mowing jobs last week, including Mr. Domino's property on Blueberry Hill Drive. It's a huge yard, so they agreed to pay me double my usual rate. All right. But if your mother asks about these shoes, you're on your own. And don't come crying to me if they blow up on you. I won't, Dad, promise, Bernard grinned. And don't try wearing these in a real game either. I'm pretty sure it's illegal. Got it, Bernard said, giving G5 a nod. Good. And don't let anyone steal these shoes either, or I swear you'll be walking around this town sock-footed. Don't worry, Dad. They're hyper-hops. I won't let them out of my sight. Uh-huh. Famous last words, Walter said, shaking his head in disbelief. Fukuzawa don't miss, Walter, G5 chimed in. I'm living proof. Yeah, that's what I'm worried about, Walter mumbled as he left the doorway to Bernard's bedroom. Chapter 2. 2 days after Bernard's dad gave him the green light to purchase the hyper-hops, they were at his doorstep and now on his feet. The sneakers looked like a futuristic version of the black and red Air Jordan 1s, with sleeker features, a jagged-looking version of the swoosh resembling a lightning bolt, and a discreet little round dial with different settings written in Japanese characters on the back heel. Bernard pedaled his bike furiously, heading to the Elmdale Park courts with G5 tucked inside his backpack and ideas bouncing around in his head of all the impressive dunks he would showcase for his friends, who were in for a big surprise. When he arrived, the courts were already packed. All his friends from Elmdale and kids from rival schools were there for the best full-court pickup games around. It was like this every weekend, and Bernard was partly responsible. Bernard was just the new kid in town a couple of years ago. When Walter had moved their family back to Elmdale, his childhood hometown, after starting and building a successful construction business far from home, Walter decided it was time to return to his old stomping grounds and help rebuild his own community, especially the town's beloved but badly neglected Elmdale Park. And maybe even more importantly, he wanted Bernard to have a stronger connection to the rest of their family. But despite being new, Bernard's courage, love for the game, and help from his older cousin Maurice, who introduced him to the right players around town, led to the formation of an impromptu team that pulled off an unlikely upset, winning Elmdale's annual Summer Jam tournament for the first time in 20 years. The last time they'd won the country's biggest and best summer basketball event, hosted in Elmdale for nearly a century, was when Walter was Bernard's age and Elmdale was still a basketball powerhouse, before their 2-decade-long losing streak to rival town Oakdale began. The victory had reignited the town's love for basketball and put an end to plans to turn the park into a landfill. Instead, it had restored Elmdale's Park to its former glory, a haven for hoops, just like it had been when Walter had been a kid growing up there. Bernard was a small, yet mighty basketball player. He possessed an extraordinary mix of speed, smarts, skill, and heart. The only thing he believed his game needed was more hops to dunk. But that was suddenly no longer a problem, now that he had his hyper hops on his feet. "We got next," Bernard announced, while hastily parking his bike and placing G5 on the cold metal bleacher to watch him while he played. G5 recorded Bernard's play, analyzed his performance, and then provided a full report of what he needed to work on. Important stats and video clips were displayed on a small digital screen about the size of a phone on G5's front panel, temporarily replacing his usual animated face. Bernard's fellow Elmdale teammates were waiting restlessly in the bleachers for his arrival. Julius, a sharpshooting two-guard, Alex, the high-flying small forward, Bernard's big cousin Maurice, who played the power forward position, and Eric, the longest and lankiest at 6 feet 8 inches at center. "What's up, cousin?" Maurice called out with his hands in the air. "Where you been? We're waiting on you." "And what are those?" Eric asked, pointing at Bernard's hyper hops. "These are why I'm late," Bernard said excitedly with a giant grin as he plopped down on the bench between his friends. "I was waiting on my special new kicks to arrive in the mail." "Yo, those look sick, bro," Alex said, admiring them up close. "What brand are those?" Julius probed, while examining the shoe's futuristic details. "Is that Japanese lettering?" "They're called hyper hops, but they're not available in the stores," Bernard said proudly. "And yeah, it's Japanese, but I haven't figured out what the lettering says yet." "Let me guess," Eric said with a grin. "You bought them on that sketchy dark website where you got G5. "Nice try," Bernard shot back, "but sketchytech.com isn't on the dark web. It's just not secure." "And calls itself sketchy," Eric raised an eyebrow. "That is pretty bad choice of words for a tech company," Julius added with a chuckle. Alex chimed in. "It's better than their old name, glitchytech.com." Bernard ignored them all, focusing instead on tightly pulling the crisp white laces of his shoes and whipping them into giant bows. "Seriously, Bernard," Maurice said, tossing the ball in the air and catching it. "You really haven't learned your lesson about buying stuff from that shady site?" "Hey, I'm right over here, Mo," G5 cried, offended by their teasing. "That shady site you're talking about is where I'm from too, bucko." "That's game!" a voice shouted from the court, interrupting their discussion and signaling someone had just hit a game-winning shot. Bernard and his team were next up to play. "Let's run," Bernard said, excited to test his new shoes. "Hey, Bernard, what makes those shoes so special?" Julius, a tech genius who loved gadgets, asked curiously. "What's that little dial used for on the back?" "You'll see. Just be ready to feed me the ball on any fast break, and I'll show you what makes them so special." "Say what now?" Julius scratched his head, completely confused. "Oh, this is going to be sick. I just know it," Alex said anxiously, while rubbing his hands together, having no idea what Bernard was talking about. "Who's ready to get dunked on today?" Bernard asked, strutting onto the court like he was 10 feet tall, his eyes locking with each player on the opposing team. "Oh, brother," Eric mumbled to himself. "Cuz, what on earth are you doing?" Maurice asked, baffled by Bernard's newfound swagger. "Check ball!" Bernard shouted, smacking the ball and twisting the little dial on the heels of his shoes until they clicked into place. A brief vibration pulsed through his soul, sending a chill up his spine. The shoes hummed, alive, powerful, ready to fly. "Pipe down, pipsqueak!" A voice behind Bernard's back called out. He whirled around to see it was none other than D.K. Hawkins, who snatched the ball from Bernard's hands and smacked it even louder than Bernard had. "I know you're not talking about dunking on somebody." "Why not?" Bernard shot back with a sly grin. "Maybe it'll be you." "Ooh!" DK's teammates moaned in unison. "Yo, shut up!" DK hollered at his team. "Don't encourage this little below-the-rim wonder here. This boy talking about dunking and can barely touch the rim. Last time I checked, ain't no colleges looking for point guards with no hops. Says the guy who wears a college basketball jersey that you probably bought on eBay. Bernard fired back, his confidence growing. I got hops now. He glanced down at his feet before staring intently at DK, ready to finally shut his playground antagonist up once and for all. DK shook his head, smiled arrogantly, and faked a pass inches from Bernard's face, causing Bernard to back up and flinch. Then he whizzed a no-look bullet pass over Bernard's head to his teammate in the paint, who turned and swished the first 2 points of the game. You're big dreaming, little boy, but I'm about to wake you up, DK sneered. Whatever. More like you're dreaming and I'm your worst nightmare. Bernard awkwardly fumbled in reply, dribbling up the court, still a little shook from DK's pass aimed at his face, but he was now even more determined to put him on a poster. It was time. Chapter 3. The game progressed into a heated battle of basketball skills and clever trash talk in equal parts. Back and forth, DK's team would score, only to be matched by a dazzling display of offensive firepower from Bernard and his squad. Although Bernard had held his own against DK, using his myriad of hard-earned shooting, dribbling, and passing skills, he still had not had a fast break opportunity to show off his hops and dunk on anyone. He had thought about driving down the lane and jumping over the entire team in a half-court play, but he wasn't sure if the shoes would work like that, or whether or not he needed a longer runway than that to get the proper amount of energy loaded into the hyperhops for them to work. And then it happened. With some unexpected help from G5, Bernard finally got the opportunity to posterize some poor soul and become an Elmdale Park legend with his first dunk. It was the game point possession. The score, Bernard's team 10, DK's squad 9. Bernard could end the game with a bang. DK dribbled up the court and attempted to pass the ball to the center, standing in the far right corner so he could cut to the basket and get a pass back from the center for an easy give-and-go layup. But just as the ball left his hands, G5 rolled down the metal bleacher to get a different angle for filming, causing the center to turn and look back curiously at G5. The ball bounced off the center's head, and Julius, who was guarding him, quickly retrieved the ball. Remembering Bernard's instructions, Julius promptly looked up and found Bernard sprinting the other way, wide-eyed. Bernard clapped his hands wildly. "Julius! Right here!" he hollered. Julius zipped a one-handed pass like a quarterback to Bernard, who caught the pass in stride, like a wide receiver at the half-court circle. This is it, Bernard thought. He had the runway he wanted. Bernard glanced back and saw DK sprinting down the court, chasing him to try to stop him from scoring a layup. But little did DK know that Bernard, with every step, was loading up his feet with the energy he needed to perform the dunk of the century. Bernard's heart was pounding out of his chest. He could feel the soles of his feet warming up, and his toes began to tingle. Now just 10 feet from the basket, Bernard took one final stride before picking up his dribble and planting his right foot onto the bright blue basketball court just before the free throw line. He could feel another powerful surge of energy pulse through his legs like an electrical current. DK, now a couple of steps behind Bernard, hollered, "I'm about to return that weak layup back to sender, pipsqueak!" Bernard ignored DK's threat, knowing he was too late. He took another long stride, forcefully drove his left foot firmly into the ground just above the dotted line in the lane, and leaped into the air with all the power his skinny leg could muster. What happened after that was indeed remarkable and never to be forgotten. A 5'3" Bernard Jones dunking a basketball on his notorious hater DK Hawkins would have been one of the greatest basketball stories of Elmdale history. But sadly, that part never happened. Instead, what took place was unexpected for Bernard, bizarre for those witnessing, and terrifying, again for Bernard. When he leaped into the air, the hyperhops took over. Doing their job all too well, they launched Bernard like a rocket ship with tremendous force, from the thrust of his high-tech sneakers' mysterious powers. With a trail of thick white smoke billowing from the bottoms of his feet, Bernard reached high enough above the rim to dunk almost instantly, but he kept elevating until his entire head, waist, and feet were suddenly above the rim. And he wasn't stopping. Bernard was soaring like a bird through the air, ascending higher and higher. Everyone on the court fearfully watched with bulging eyes, gasping remarks, and grunting sounds of disbelief. Screaming in terror, Bernard soared over the tall chain-link fence that wrapped around the outdoor basketball courts and sputtered over the Elmdale Park community building 50 yards away before starting his descent and finally, miraculously, landing uninjured with a massive splash in the deepest end of the Elmdale Park community swimming pool that was right next to the community building. Where Bernard landed in a cannonball plunge, there were several diving boards, low, medium, high, and you must be crazy, super high platform. So almost no one noticed Bernard crashing down from the heavens, except for the ones who did. A group of mischievous third-grade boys roughhousing in the deep end. From the dark, chlorine-treated depths, Bernard burst through the shimmering surface, gasping for air. His long, curly brown hair was flattened over his face, through burning, bloodshot eyes. He spotted 5 blurry, rambunctious boys bobbing in a circle around him, staring like he was from outer space. It didn't take long for Bernard to understand why their expressions were so bewildered. "Are you an alien?" a red-headed boy with freckles asked bluntly. "Where did you come from?" a boy with the same brown skin tone as Bernard asked slowly, like he might not understand earthly English. A skinny sunburned boy wearing goggles emerged suddenly from underwater, excited. "He's wearing some futuristic rocket shoes!" "Yep, that's alien technology," a short chubby boy, head barely over the water, added convincingly. "My dad said they had those." "Yes, I'm an alien," Bernard said, his tone annoyed as he cleared his hair from his face, broke through their circle, and swam towards the ladder to climb out. "So don't tell anyone about this or I'll have you beamed up to my spaceship." "Wait, hold up. That's Bernard Jones. That's Bernard Jones, right?" the brown-skinned boy's twin brother announced, glancing at the others in confusion. "No way that's a real kid," the chubby boy objected, eyes wide. "How does a normal human have alien tech shoes?" "Come on, do you think a normal kid would come to the pool wearing alien shoes?" the sunburned boy insisted. "Look, I don't know about the shoes, but he's definitely not an alien," the first twin said, clearly certain. "That's Bernard Jones. We live on the same block." "Dude, you lied," the redhead boy cried. "Not cool, dude. Where did you get alien shoes from, though? Seriously," the chubby boy asked again. "They're not alien shoes, Einstein," Bernard said, using one of the boy's towels to dry off. "You and your dad watch too much TV." "Hey, that's my towel," sunburned boy cried. Bernard looked down at his soaking wet hyper hops, chlorine water dripping from them and sizzling in the hot summer sun. "Great. Ruined." "Can I have them?" the redhead boy asked. "No, you can't have my shoes. These cost me a lot," Bernard said impatiently before taking off his shoes, pouring out some residual water, and heading toward the locker rooms in the community building. "Hey, it's your birthday party today, dude, and your dad is rich. Just ask him," another boy said to the redheaded boy. "Hey, where'd you get them shoes?" the redhead boy shouted. "Japan," Bernard shouted back before entering the building. "Geez, that kid's obsessed with these stupid shoes," he thought to himself. "Japan?" the boys echoed, all astonished.